We're all here.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Roll call.
Trustee Bree here, trustee Hallback here, trustee Rubin here.
Okay, are there any public comments? Yes, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Favor?
Aye.
All right, moving on through. Nikki, do you want to walk us through? No.
Sure. Okay, so on the agenda tonight, included in the packet is the December treasurer's report. These are unaudited numbers, it's just on a cash basis. So we'll go through some of the highlights in the major operating funds. We'll touch on the Glencoe Golf Club, and then also the last CIP update for December. Okay, so kicking off with the general fund, the big story here is property taxes. As we've talked at length, Cook County was very late in issuing the second installment bills. So as of December 31st, we were at 89.6% of budget. Shortfall in the budget, just in the general fund, of $929,000. Typical collections on our levy are closer to 96 to 98% usually. So we were waiting on a significant amount of money still. We were hoping to receive about $4.8 million in property tax collections in December. We got about 3.7. About midway through the month, I was pleasantly surprised to get 3.7 because it took a long time to just get there. That was general fund only, so we were just a little bit over $1 million shy. What we've received so far in 2023 has gone beyond that. We've received $1.8 million in collections. That's primarily general fund money. So we are essentially whole from a general fund standpoint, property tax collections. We did speak to the board about this previously. At the end of the year, we advanced about $230,000 to the police pension fund. Really wanted to make sure that all of that money was there as of year end for a number of reasons, including making sure that they had sufficient cash flow to make benefit payments in the pension fund. Also, so that it was officially on the record that if full contribution was made to the pension fund prior to year end. So that's important both in our annual audit process, but also for the rating call that we are likely to have this year. When we go out for bonds, at least that full contribution was made despite the fact that the county was behind. That being said, we have an agreement with the pension board that we will reimburse ourselves for that advance for any contributions that they get this year up to that $231,000 advance. So if by chance they get more than that, they can keep it, great, it's a windfall for them. I don't anticipate that happening, but at least we can recoup that money back to the general fund. So far this year, we've received $199,000 towards the pension fund for that specific levy. That money goes right into their bank account. So that's why we had to have that agreement with the pension fund so we could transfer that money back to our account. So we're still about $30,000 shy on recouping that money in the general fund. And as you recall from previous years, that's not unusual that we would have to make that extra contribution at the end of the year because of property tax appeals and such. Usually our collections don't get us all the way to that required contribution.
Why were we so far ahead in property tax revenue for K? And if we're
Behind in summer.
no, I know, but we were 1.1 behind and we've gotten 1.8 in January. Some of that 2023 payments.
Not yet.
So how do we go? That just strikes for property tax. We're usually pretty close for estimates.
Correct. We are pretty close. One thing that we didn't budget for and we didn't anticipate was that extra distribution that we received as part of, can't remember the public act, but they passed a public act that would allow for an extra distribution to come to you for refunds that occurred in the prior year. So what happens when we get property tax collections is that we ask for a dollar amount and then people throughout the year will appeal their taxes and we get whatever's left over. So we might ask for 3 million, but we might only get 2.8. What the county decided to do, or I don't think they decided to do this on their own, but there was a law that was passed that said now the county has to go through a calculation and say, okay, Glencoe asked for 3 million, they only got 2.8. Now we are going to give them another $200,000. So that's part of the true up process with the second installment bills. They add that additional dollar amount.
That's when that happened.
Yes, this is the first thing.
Yeah, do they send you a reconciliation at some point to tell you how much is this and how much is that?
They do that. They just send us a dollar amount. Yes.
You just are
So
great.
then we have to go back and say, we asked for book 3 and then -2 and +2.
Yeah.
We can try. But they do their own calculations. Not really interested in our numbers.
One of the things Nikki and I were kind of monitoring this through December as property tax bills went out and we're starting to be repaid. And I would say, so, did we receive anything from the county in the morning? And Nikki would be like, no, not yet, but the day is still young, and then we'd get 2 distributions in one day. And then we wouldn't get anything for a week, and then we'd get a distribution and a distribution, and they would just kind of show up without anything other than a transfer of a dollar figure into the account. So it's unique.
It's not a lot of rhyme or reason in the
Unique.
process.
Does it change how we budget though for property tax revenue?
Really, because there's not really a way for us to know what the recouped amount is. Because we kind of, I guess I should take that back. Because historically, we have budgeted for some loss in the collection. So I think it's going forward, now that we know that money's coming, we probably should adjust for some percentage once we know and have established a history of what's been lost and what's getting recouped. So yeah, I guess going forward. So that being said, you probably heard about this in the news. The first installment bills have already been extended. I think for no other reason other than for taxpayer relief, because the bills are already posted on the treasurer's website. They're available to be paid. So we are going to see a 1 month delay in that first installment too. Hopefully some people will pay their bills when they normally would. So we might see something in March, but likely not until April. So all that being said about property taxes, the good news story this month is that our sales tax receipt in December was higher than what we were anticipating for the budget and higher than last year. So this is breaking a 5-month trend of year over year, those months being a little bit less, albeit 0.8% higher, but the point is it was less. So this is good, starting to course correct, hopefully. So we'll keep watching the trend on this and adding to that chart in the treasurer's report just to make sure that that's not dipping anymore. Really good news story for all of the general fund in 2022. We had very strong receipts in income tax, personal property replacement tax, places for eating tax, and even telecommunications tax, which we really have seen kind of decline in more recent years. But those were higher than both the prior year and budget. So that's really kind of what carried us through with property taxes kind of falling short. Now, depending on where the economy goes, if we're looking at a recession, depending on what you believe is going to happen, those are also fairly economically sensitive revenues that we really need to watch. So if those start to dip, that could be a potential issue for us. On the expenditure side, we're running both less than prior year, and we're only at 91.2% of budget, which is a good news story. Your revenue's coming in strong, expenditures are under budget. However, I do want to caveat that we do still have invoices coming in from 2022. Some of them are quite large because they're projects that we're rolling over and they're just closing out those invoices. We just scheduled our annual audit, so our preliminary field work will start at the end of this month. And then the final field work will take place at the end of February, early March. So we should have semi-final numbers by probably April. have an idea of where the general fund. See, the other piece that I wanted to touch on in the general fund is utility tax. That's starting to pick up, and now with ComEd and the natural gas utilities all requesting potential rate increases, I would expect that revenue to pick up as well if those are approved and that goes through. On the water fund side, volumetric revenue and fixed charge revenue were both less than the prior year. We were expecting that, and we did budget for that, because if you remember, last summer was extreme drought-like conditions and our water fund did really well. We knew that that was kind of an anomaly, so we budgeted a little bit less this year. The volumetric revenue came in at 113% of budget, and then our fixed charge revenue came in at 83.3% of budget. We did just launch the smart meter portal. So we've been pushing that through e-news, and it's all on the website. We have FAQs for people to sign up on that. So we'll see if that changes any of our water use, with people being able to monitor that.
I will say it's a very intuitive and cool tool to have at your disposal if you are interested in seeing where water usage is taking place during the course of the day. I was the guinea pig to make sure that it worked and functioned appropriately. And it's down to the hour of usage to see how long that shower my 7-year-old decided to take, actually, how much water we actually used in that hour-long shower that I didn't know was happening. So from that standpoint, kind of the fascinating piece of that is the ability to really track, and I think in the summertime months with irrigation systems and things like that in place, people will have a real opportunity to check on where they're using water and how much they're using. So.
And you can sign up for alerts.
Yep.
So if you're interested in it, it'll set up alerts either like volume based or dollar amount based. And you could choose if you want a phone call, a text message, or an email. We've got it all covered. So,
Maybe go to our 17-year-olds.
you can choose the cell phone.
Start making lots of noise.
You can't make the water shut off.
So that, let's see, that's revenue in the water fund. On an expenditure side in the water fund, it's much lower than last year, and it's only at 52% of budget. The big driver of that is because we put the water main project on hold in 22 because of the bid results. That will roll into fund balance, and that will be aggregated with our planned bond issue this year. And the fund balance plus the bond issue will fund the next 3 years worth of water main improvements. That's separate from the lagoon transmission main that was all funded with ARPA money. So that's configured separately than what we're planning here for the next 3 years.
What about issues we have besides your golf?
Just alternate revenue bonds. I think it's 4.3 million that we were estimating.
Yeah, I just did.
Mhm. Yeah, so those would be the only ones.
And the Lagoon Main project still won't close out for a few more months into this fiscal year as that finalizes out. Hopefully the work's complete in the next couple of weeks. So that's also, I think, contributing to expenditures being a little low last year.
How much longer do we think it's gonna be closed?
Next week.
Hopefully by the end of the month,
And it's done.
that you're running around.
Well, theoretically.
It should, but he hasn't been able to.
Yeah, that's what they're running.
So moving on to the other funds, debt service MFT capital funds, our expenditures are all as expected in those funds. As I mentioned earlier, we're still rounding out some of those final invoices in those funds. It's all bond funded projects. Or in the case of motor fuel tax fund, that's reserves that have been aggregated for that purpose. Some of those projects will be carrying into 23. That'll come before you in a few moments. I don't want to steal Margaret's thunder. But we did in December have to dip into our debt service fund reserves a little bit. As you probably recall from earlier discussions about property taxes, we typically pay debt service payments in June and December. And we wait for property taxes to kind of aggregate to make those. So in June, it's usually the interest payment, and then in December, it's interest and principal. So that's when the real money comes out of that fund. So we did have to dip into reserves a little bit. We're still, I think, only about $20,000 shy in the debt service fund levy of what should be coming in. So we're in good shape now in January, but in December that dipped down. On the personnel side of things, I just wanted to take this snapshot as of year end. This, again, these are cash numbers, so we still have one payroll that we need to accrue back into that year. But our personnel costs are about $659,000 higher this year than last year. Some of that is cost of living agreements, the settlement of the 2 union contracts that happened this year. But a big piece of that is still overtime, and that's what's driving that amount is so far over budget, and that's really due to the vacancies that we're seeing. So there, on a surplus side of things, on the revenue side with the general fund, we're expecting the general fund revenue to come in about $360,000 over budget. On the water fund, we're expecting about $510,000 over budget. When you look at revenues and expenditures together, as of today, the general fund is projecting a $600,000 surplus. The water fund is 1.7, and obviously that's due to the deferral of the water main project.
What's the revenue project gonna cost you?
About 1.2.
Okay.
That'll be for 2023, and then the rest of it will.
That's on Thursday night's agenda for the board's consideration.
But so if we included the extra payment we got, the true up we described for property tax, that would put the general fund surplus
They
at
put it over.
1.2.
Yes, yes. So we're in better shape than what the cash numbers show. Yeah. Let's see, from the fund reserve standpoint, right now it's sitting at about 11.6 in the general fund. Again, that's unaudited. So we are going to be accruing expenditures back to last year. So those are not final numbers. On an inflationary standpoint, we really don't have any new items that we haven't already reported to the finance committee. We are still waiting on the PW leaf vac that was ordered last January with no end in sight, no delivery date in sight. And then also our public safety squads, the 2 that we had ordered were carried over, but we don't have a delivery date. So we're hoping to receive this year.
What's the general materials, like, you know, we've seen prices of a lot of things skyrocket. Is that debated at all?
Commodities and other materials. Is that-
Yeah, I mean, like think of like 2 to 4, like a big past one of these things that went off in that last year. Is that come back in?
I think we're seeing some normalizing. We'll find out here in the next 60 days when we bid out 2 big projects.
Yeah, fuel is definitely significantly dropped, thankfully.
The other element to part of the big surplus is all the stuff we, some big ticket items that we wanted to buy that we couldn't get that. Yeah. Many hundreds of thousands.
On a whole, commodities and contractual services are still well under budget. But we are still seeing, I think, some elevated prices on like aggregate materials, backfill, like some of the construction materials for some of the projects. But like Dave said, see on a large ticket item. What comes in later. Are any other questions about the treasurer's report? Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Stella for the golf club thing. Thank you.
Happy to report we had a great year, another great year, exceeded 40,000 rounds this year. This is the 3rd year in a row with our record. Our unaudited net is 345,611,000. That is with spending $265,000 in capital. So we generated 610,000, spent 265. We have 345. It's going to increase our cash reserve funds. So it was a very good year. I am also very happy to announce we will be having a new restaurant vendor this year. We just received an agreement back from Open Kitchens. This is a organization that is golf specific. They were at Winnetka. And obviously Winnetka is closed, so they had room to fit us in. They've also indicated that they're very interested in the new clubhouse and want to build a relationship prior to that. Obviously, there's no promises in that. We're also currently working in Highland Park, and they took over Northbrook's Heritage Oaks when they just reopened this year too. So going to see an increase, improved quality, service, and menu items this year and next year. It's a 2-year contract. And that's all I have to report.
So do you think when we get this? Thinking about merchandise and some of the other revenue, I think it can be significantly higher or just
Merchandise?
anything, I mean, just sort of other, beyond food and drink.
Yes, I guess something is gonna make money.
Well, yeah.
That's
Rounds of golf.
increase.
It's in the incremental revenue that was all built in.
Yeah.
Was increase in obviously food and beverage, but increase in outings because we'll have a venue for them, increase in just general day-to-day use of the club because people are attracted to a place that they can stay after. So every line item showed an increase
Okay.
incrementally with the new clubhouse.
Yeah, sort of wondering if-
Including-
what other.
Yeah, including, I mean, honestly, you don't really make a lot on merchandise, but having the pro shop and the clubhouse in the same building and having non-golfers in that building, they will be going over to the pro shop and buying lovely local wear.
Yeah.
Wear around town. So it'll be a whole new
Yeah.
rebranding, and getting our logo out there soon.
On to our CIP update.
So good evening. Tonight I'll be presenting the January CIP update, which is inclusive of the calendar year 22 December numbers. This is your final update for calendar year 22 for the CIP program, which includes unaudited expenditures for 22 CIP projects. Most of the projects are complete for this year, but we do have some expenditures that are now going to be, and some expenditures still to be processed out of 22. But some projects that will carry over to 23. You can find this in your packet on page 60 through 62. So some target dates that were moved from 22 to 23 that you're aware of. The relocate of the Beach Road storm sewer outfall has been moved. The council chambers upgrade, that's also been moved. And the traffic signal controller modifications project has been moved. Those were all mentioned in previous reports. As was stated tonight, the Skokie Lagoon transmission main that was anticipated to be complete in December will be wrapped up here in 23. The replacement of pumps and motors for the high lift is anticipated to be finished in February of 2023. And Green Bay Trail crossing improvements at Hazel Avenue, that's anticipated to be completed in April of 23. Coming to you in February for the Finance Committee meeting, we'll have a list of all the 23 CIP projects and updates to start off the year. Staff's available if you have any questions.
Quick thing to note for the Finance Committee as we have been working to advise when donations make their way to the village. We did include something in a Friday report, but I again wanted to address it in a meeting, in an open meeting. We received a donation from District 35 of a almost new snow plow, a V plow that does fit on some of our vehicles and is a pretty significant addition to our fleet. We actually don't have one. This was sitting in storage for about a decade or so, and District 35 was cleaning things out. And while they could have sold it, we think it probably has a value of about $5,000. They called Public Works and said, hey, we've got this, would you guys have use for it? And after Don stopped doing backflips, he said that would be great. And we have taken ownership of it from District 35. But we just, again, in line with the policy, wanted to make sure we addressed it with this committee. If anybody has any concerns with that, we can give it back. Don will be sad. Probably get out.
Yeah. As long as it wasn't used in a bank or whatever.
I don't think so, no. But it was, I would say, it's another aspect of just the really great working relationship we have with all of our partner governments, but District 35 is always a great partner, so it's nice of them to think of us first. That's all we got.
All right, anything that you guys have, anything else? Yep. All right, motion to adjourn.
So second,
Favor.
aye.
All right, thank you.
Thanks everybody for staying late.
This is a letter that was sent to the state to get.
So, Penny, they're late, but then they send you extra money, but they don't